Today's topic is about Minhagim. Now, it's very interesting when we talk about Minhagim that there's many different Minhagim that we all have: Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Yemen's. Sorry, excuse me. Okay. So yes, we have many types of minhagim going around, and hopefully today we can clarify what types of minhagim are there. There is different levels of minhagim, and the implications about it. Are we allowed to change it? Are we allowed to? Or do we have to follow specific minhagim as our parents? Could we change what our parents does according to the community? As I said, also, do women have to follow their spouses, the husbands at all times? So let's understand it a little bit in more detail. So, of course, minhagim are part of our daily life, and we have them in many scenarios, and part of them even seems like halacha. The most common one, just to share, is the second day of Yom Tov. Second day of Yom Tov is called the minhag. Now you might say, well, it's halacha. Of course, minhag comes from the time of the rabbis. Now the word minhag, we have this idea is some kind of a tradition of a chicken soup, or maybe the rice of Pesach or things like that. But minhag has many categories of efficiency, and depends how we learn it and how we derive the minhagim and their and the laws about it, and what we can do, what we cannot do, depends in many things. So let's go through them. First of all, we need to understand that there's 6 categories of minhagim. Number 1, minhagim that are accepted by a community to protect themselves from violating a prohibition. For example, a community accepts upon themselves to refrain from traveling to another city on Friday out of concern that they won't be able to come on Shabbat properly. Places like Bnei Brak or Jerusalem, they already put the border, they put this like a chain or whatever to stop people coming in half an hour earlier, or sometimes in order to stop people from coming in. And of course, as you can ask any religious person in Israel, we don't go to long journeys a few hours before Shabbat because we don't want to get stuck on Shabbat. So this is kind of a border, but nevertheless, it's a minhag to make sure that you don't violate the Shabbat. Now, there's the second one is minhagim whose acceptance was not limited to a certain community, rather to a large area. Anyone can think about that, like it was a minhag that went all over. It wasn't specifically in one area, and that is Cherem da Rabbeinu Gershom, the Rabbeinu Gershom's prohibitions, which is not to marry 2 women, to not force a divorced wife, and not to open letters that are not yours. There's a whole list of Rabbeinu Gershom. He lived around 1,000 years ago, more before the Rambam, one of the Maimonides, and he established minhagim that until today we keep. So this is a very strong minhag. Nevertheless, it's not from the sources of the Talmud, like the second Yom Tov, but it has a very strong outcome or decree, if you want to call it, to its laws, to its halacha. So that's Cherem da Rabbeinu Gershom. There's a whole question about, is it until 1,000 years, or it's more than 1,000 years? Minhag, how long can we prolong it? But the idea of the Cherem da Rabbeinu Gershom, that it's not just in his location, but it went all around Ashkenaz. In Sepharad, like the Rashba says, we didn't accept it, and that's why throughout these 1,000 years, places like in Arab lands or North Africa and Iraq, they continue to marry 2 wives and so on. The third one is minhagim that are developed in order to resolve a halachic dispute. So we have a dispute, we don't know which to go to, we don't know what's the resolution, And the minhag is to follow usually the one that is more strict about it, because we don't know who to follow. So that's how we do. And nevertheless, it's not that we say that that's the minhag since the Gemara time or so on, but because we don't know who to follow, we follow a specific minhag. Now, number 4, minhagim that introduced new practice. So the example for this is, which you might find interesting, is taking aravas around the bima on Sukkot. That is a minhag based. It's a new minhag that is brought, or lighting the Hanukkah candle lightings in the shul, which is something that we took upon ourselves. We don't have to, but that's the minhag that we do in the synagogue. We light candles in the shul. If I want to stop this, I'm not allowed to. It's a minhag. Now, the 5th one is minhagim that come to define an existence practice. So it's more about putting the halakha, so we know the law. How exactly it's played out, that already is dependent on the minhag. And the most common example is prayers. We all know that we need to pray. But how do we pray? What we say, the pronunciation, the variation, all that depends on the minhag. If you go into a Yemen synagogue, believe me, you will not follow. You don't understand what they say. You don't understand where they are. It's totally different. We all have a different. Are we praying or we're not praying? Of course, we all are praying, but we all have different minhagim. And the questions may rise is, first, if I move to a community which has a different minhag, what will it be? If my father has one minhag and I want to do something else, what's the outcome to that? There's many questions of that. Now, the last point is minhagim that are developed based on a mistake. That we will touch later on. So there's some things that we did that I have to find out exactly what scenarios it is, but it developed, but it's not even true. It has no source to it. Okay. So the first thing I want to touch is to protect a prohibition. So we said to protect a prohibition is not driving from one place to another place. And if you go from a place that observes the minhag to a place that doesn't observe the minhag, the Mishnah states 2 principles. One, you must keep both of them. So let's say I go to a place that has a new minhag, so I need to keep my minhagim plus the minhag that I come to in that place. Okay? And more than that, there's a prohibition against defining the minhag of the current location. Why? Anyone can tell me why. If I come to Northwood and I start bringing my Sephardi customs, what's going to happen?
He'll stone you.
Exactly. Koirach. Bringing a different minhag, there's going to be a dispute. There's going to be a clash. So that is the reason why I'm not allowed to bring another minhag to another place. There's a whole huge discussion about Israel. Is Israel a new territory? It's a territory that was who was there first. It's very interesting. Okay, we'll get to that hopefully. Zat Hashem. So we'll start with the Gemara. Records a story about Bashian, where the local custom was to refrain from going from one place to another place before Shabbos, as we explained, because of Shabbat. And then the second, so that was that generation. Then the second generation, their children, came to Rabbi Yochanan in the Gemara and says, we do not want to continue that. They had an issue. There was issues over there that could lead to a prohibition on Shabbat. So they made the takana, they made that ruling. But we cannot afford to do that. We need it. We don't want this takana. So Rabbi Yochanan said, this is very important. Rabbi Yochanan said, since the first generation already accepted this practice, it cannot be undone. Why? Al titosh Torah timecha. It says in Mishlei. It says in Mishlei. I think it's Proverbs. Yeah. Proverbs. It says that Al titosh Torah timecha. A person should not Titosh means abandon your mother's Torah, which means tradition. Al titosh Torah imecha. So if your parents have a tradition, continue it.
Why do you call it mother's tradition when you said a woman takes the husband's tradition?
Exactly, because there's many answers to that. But one answer is that usually you learn the because it's not halacha, you learn the nuances. You learn the stories, because minhag is more about what was the scenario at that time, what happened. So usually the mother is the one that's passing over the stories of the family, of what we did, what we cooked, what we didn't cook, what we had rice, we didn't have rice. That came through the mother. Al titosh Torah timecha. That's one answer, but there's many answers of why Torah timecha it goes by the mother. Okay. So there's a dispute with the Rishonim. Rabbeinu Asher, just to understand, 1250 to 1327 he lived, and his opinion was that, and this is basically the main dispute of what is it in a minhag that I'm not allowed to go against it. Is it like of a neder, like of a vow? So since we took upon ourselves something, we're not allowed to break this vow. As an example, if I say I'm going to do every Friday, I'm going to the synagogue and do I don't know what, and bring Shabbos. Example, I bring Shabbos a half an hour earlier, and I do that more than 3 times. If I want to change that minhag on myself without making the community, I have to nullify my vows because I took upon myself something. So Rabbeinu Asher's svara, Rabbeinu Asher's thought is that all minhagim, especially these types of minhagim that protects prohibitions, is taking upon yourself a vow, and therefore I'm not allowed to go against it unless I nullify the neder, the vow. Now the Ramban.
So who can nullify it?
Okay, that's a different question. But first of all, we need to understand where does it come from. Well, technically, who can nullify? You have 3 rabbis. You have 3 rabbis that nullify any ato. Every erev, how do you say it? Every erev Yom Kippur, we nullify our vows. Okay, but it has to be more specific. As an example, someone puts 2 tefillin every time and he wants to change it. There's many scenarios that if you have a custom to do something and you want to change it, you need to nullify the vow. Okay, the Ramban says it's nothing to do with Atarat Nedarim. And he says it's more than that. He explains that the source of the minhag, al titosh, like we say, we should not go against our parents. Since that was the tradition, we have to follow it as the verse says, and al titosh Torah timecha, I have to continue it. And it's nothing to do with vows. It's continuing about that becomes a halacha. Now remember, the Shulchan Aruch also brings it down and says, Minhag Yisrael dinhu. A minhag in Israel, it's like a law. Or sometimes it's even more strict than a law. We're not allowed to go against it. Now, even though the Shulchan Aruch brings the 2 opinions, 2 sides, a vow or continuing like your mother, it's more onto the Shulchan Aruch rules more to the side that it's called a vow. But let's continue. That's just to understand where it comes from. The Gemara continues and quotes an opinion of Rav Ashi, who notes that there is a difference between someone who travels to another location to visit and to someone that goes to another location to move there. If he goes to visit, okay, I'm going now to visit a community in Athens or in Bulgaria. I have to keep both chumrot. I have to keep both strings because I have to keep myself because I still are connected to the place where I came from, and I'm not allowed to go against the minhag of the place. As an example, a Sephardi person comes to an Ashkenazi synagogue. Let's not talk about the rabbi, just a visitor. When everyone stands up in Kaddish, what does he need to do? He has to stand up in Kaddish. Now the question will be, what about an Ashkenazi that goes into Sephardi community, where one might say, well, you don't want to go against the community, but I have to still continue my string, which is to stand up for Kaddish. So what do?
Have to stand.
Have to stand. Why is that? For this reason. Because I have to take upon myself the string of the community plus my string, but I cannot go against my string.
And what about the Amida when I'm in a Sephardi synagogue and they have a different type of Amida?
No, that's already you do your tefillah and quietly as you practice, and then the Chazarat Hashatz, it's nothing to do with you. He's praying for everyone, so you're gonna answer Amen. Okay, and also by answering Amen, you might not be allowed to. It depends. But in general, without going into today, because today things are very different, because we moved a lot in places and we have many synagogues next to each other. But in general, I'm not allowed to scream, Amen Yeshua Rabba, in the middle of a Hasidic community where they say, like something totally different, and you're making a clash. We have to understand that it's very wise of the Chachamim and the Torah to understand this nuance of clash, because we might say, "Wow, we live in peace. We should all live in peace. We should all live in harmony." What do you want? We know exactly how things work. We know exactly. That's why one of the laws regarding to out of context regarding to halacha of kehuna, of priesthood, we have to make sure that the person that comes to do the bracha won't be laughed at. You might say, we all love each other. We shouldn't laugh at each other. But Chachamim was sensitive for people that shouldn't come to the scenario at all. Okay, that's opening and closing. So, again, so we're talking about someone that moves from one location to a second location. Rabbeinu Asher writes that, and this is basically disputes between the Rosh and the Rambam. The Rosh says he needs to have two stringed himself and the place. The Rambam doesn't. The Rosh says that no, he doesn't need to continue with his stringed ruling. Okay. Okay, let's continue. Okay, now, Rabbeinu Asher's opinion is that Torat Imecha, when we say do not follow the laws of your mother, is not necessarily your mother. As an example, if your mother is not religious, or for so on, if a person is a convert, or whatever it is, the pasuk means that we should follow the tradition. That's what it's teaching, but not necessarily per se your mother. Okay. By the way, it could be your mother's a Sephardi or Ashkenazi. It doesn't matter. Ella, what does it mean? It means that the rabbis of the town. That's you find. Rabbi David Karliner brings in Rabbeinu Asher's opinion. Okay. So it's important to understand that technically it's not your mother. As you said, we should follow your fathers. But the idea of tradition goes by the mother. That's why it was written in that type of wording. Now, what happens if someone left his town, but not settle in a new town yet? So until he doesn't come into a new town, he must keep his own minhagim. And when he visits the city and so on, he also needs to keep the minhag with both of them. But then when he establishes himself in a new city, he already needs to go to the minhagim as a new place. I would just remember, step back a second. We're talking about in those days, when someone went from North Africa to Ashkenaz, there was no synagogues of Sephardim in his community, in this place. So if he was to live a Jewish life in that community, the only community that there is the Ashkenazi community. He has to go like the Ashkenazi, because that's how he lives. Today, we have something different. We have a new era where in one place we have many, many, many territories you can choose. Now, going back to the second Yom Tov, he writes, and this is, of course, this famous question: when someone from Israel goes to Chutz La'aretz, to outside of Israel, someone from Israel goes from outside of Israel, from diaspora comes to Israel, a person has to follow the minhag of the place. So David, let's say you go to Tel Aviv for Passover.
Yeah.
And the second day of the opposite. He comes to here. But anyway, when you go to there, you go, let's say, to second day of Israel, you have to follow your halacha, your way of living as in England, because you're just visiting there. So you have to do second day in Yom Tov. Whereas someone from Israel, technically, when he comes to Israel, to outside of Israel, he doesn't need to. But as we said, he needs to also take the string of the place that he's there. Therefore, he should put the tefillin while no one is looking, meaning in his room, and going to the prayers. And he's not allowed to carry, not allowed to do any melachot against the law of the place. It's the same idea, the same concept.
But if I made aliyah, I would then it's
be good. So the aliyah process is very interesting. If you're going there if you already established yourself, then that's it, you're Israeli. But let's say you're going there to with a few a bit. So you're going there first time, the second time, the third time. You're going to check around the area, and you're not technically established yet. So you're not there yet until you establish yourself. Now the Rav Ovadia and the great rabbis talked about Talmid Yeshiva, a student. There's a big response about this. It's yeshiva that goes to learn in Israel. Does he go like the Israel or does he go like the Chutz La'aretz? Big dispute. Now, what was the idea? The idea was like this: if you're going to Israel and coming back all the time to live outside of Israel, then it's as if you didn't leave your house in New York. But if you go to Israel and in your mind you want to find a woman and you want to establish yourself and to live there, then it's as if you're living there. Even though technically it really depends on who's paying your bills. Is it your parents or yourself? Because if it's your parents, then you're still connected to New York. But even if he is, and this is one opinion, even if you are still getting payment from your parents from New York, but nevertheless, if your thought is to stay in Israel, to find a wife and to establish yourself and live in Israel, then it's as if you're living in Israel and you don't have to do 2 days. And it's questions of big questions. Do you drive a car on the second day or not? Okay. Now today, in modern times, it's interesting because if we look at the minhag, it's not really located on location of the place, but it's more family oriented based. So it's more about not where you live, but who your family is. If you come from an Ashkenazi or specific Yeki or specific Sephardi or specific Yemen, whatever it is, specifically to your family, you have to follow your family. And what is the reason? Because there is a Gemara that discusses the default hours for the day labor. And the Gemara notes over there that normally the hours are determined by local customs. However, if there's no local customs, the person stays until dusk and doesn't start until sunrise. So we kind of create a new custom. The Gemara asks, wait a second, how is it possible but that there's no local custom? And the answer, they're dealing with a new city. When someone comes and establishes a new city, he continues the city that he came from. So if I come from Israel and Marsha, you come from England, and we both go to New America, as where Moshe Feinstein talked a lot about it, about America that's new established. So I need to continue my customs, and you continue your customs. And here we come to the scenario, living in modern times, where we are establishing communities, different types of communities in the same place. So that gives the reason why I'm allowed to continue my laws and you're allowed to continue your laws. However, just to mention that going back to Israel, there was a huge response between Rabbi Ovadia and Moshe Feinstein, and also before in the time of Shulchan Aruch, Israel. Who was there before? Was there from the Shnorach time, because he was there, the Maradata, and you have to follow the laws. And everyone that came there needed to follow the laws of Israel laws, which is the Sephardi laws. Or which is the other opponent's argument, is that from the Shulchan Aruch until today, there was a hefsek. There was a time where there was abolished land. There was no one people living there. And therefore, the Gaon Mivina, which brought his students to Israel, it's like coming into a new land and everyone has their own synagogue and everyone follows their own thing. So, of course, the Ashkenazim, as you can see today, they follow their rules and they say we don't apply to following the rules of the land of the Shulchan Aruch. But the Rabbi Vada, which is Sephardi, he rules that anyone that comes to Israel needs to follow the rules of the Shulchan Aruch, because he was there and he established that in Israel, and therefore it didn't stop, and he needs to continue. America is a new land, and anyone that comes needs to follow their own ruling. Okay, that's clear. Now let's continue a little bit forward. Is a wife bound by a husband minhagim? So we know that a woman that gets married, it says in the Tzemach Tzedek, she follows the minhagim of her husband. Why? Because if she were to keep her father's minhagim, again, what would happen? Remember, there was two reasons. What?
Total confusion in the family.
Again, yes, it will be dispute. You know, I do this, you do this, it will be machlokes. And what about shalom bais? So because of that, the wife has to follow the food, and there's a whole discussion if she needs to do atarat nedarim or doesn't need to atarat nedarim, which is taking out her vows because she didn't eat kitniot, let's say, and now she's starting to eat kitniot. Does she need to change it or not? But mainly today, she marries automatically. She doesn't need to, and she can continue because one side, because of the dispute. On another explanation is because she's moving to new territory, and now she's leaving her parents, and she's coming back to the house. She's coming back to a new territory, which is her husband, and then she follows her husband. It's like a new land. Now, why is it? Why is it so important for us to understand the two sides, the two explanations? What will happen when a woman gets divorced? What does she do? Does she continue the customs now she was used to, or she goes back to the beginning? What would you say?
Has to follow her husband because of the children.
Okay, you're bringing in children now that she lives in scenario. Children, okay. Let's say there's no children. Let's say the children are out already, or whatever reasons. If you take out the children, what would you say, Marsha, or Chaim, or David, or Jenny?
Goes back to where she comes from.
Sorry?
She goes back to what she was brought up on.
Why?
No, good question.
So it will depend. Sorry?
If she's Sephardi, she marries an Ashkenazi. After the divorce, she's got no connections with the Ashkenazi community. Her real roots are with Sephardim.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
agree.
Well, what do you say, Marsha?
I think that she keeps the ones that she got from her husband because
Why?
it's become her new tradition.
Oh, so it's become her new. That's her tradition now.
It's established.
Okay, so
Let's go back to the story of Ruth, where one daughter-in-law is told, go back to your father, i.e. his customs, whereas Ruth will follow her mother-in-law.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Everyone in a different direction.
But what's the answer?
But bringing out Ruth and the answer is also will be connected to how what happens when she goes back. Does she go back to her father's house, or like today, doesn't go back to her father's house? She lives independently. And maybe it depends which generation you live in. In those days, maybe when you were divorced, you would go back to your parents' house, and therefore she's obliged to live. She's living in a household that follows the Ashkenazi. She cannot start eating rice over there. Or she lives at her own, and she's her own independent woman now, and therefore she needs to continue what she, like Marsha says. Marsha is bringing the independent woman situation. So does she follow it or not? So really will depend also if it's a vow or if it's not a vow. If it's a vow, then she took upon herself this vow, then she needs to continue. But if it's just the minhag of the place, the minute she's detaching herself from the husband, she goes back to her mother's Mesorah. a mother's leniency. So it might depend on the two reasons why a person has to follow the minhagim.
But in a case like that, if she gets married, she's taken a vow of marriage. She then has the get, and that breaks it. So she's back where she started, isn't she?
So it would depend. If it's back in regarding to a minhag, she's back where she started. Meaning what? Meaning that we need to follow the traditions of the mother, or if it's a vow that she took upon herself, it doesn't matter where she is now. It's she took it upon herself, and that's it.
But also,
and even if she's divorced, she still needs to continue as an independent woman as she was used to.
But if you're divorced, you have been married, so you never go back to the state of not being married.
Interesting.
And you still cover your hair.
Yeah, well, that for different reasons, but you're right.
But you can never, you are a married woman who has been divorced.
But by the way, I think, sorry to say, it's not from a different. I think one of the reasons why you continue, because you have the minhag of continuing to covering the hair.
Yeah.
But anyway, covering the hair is a whole discussion. Do even women that are not married need to cover their hair? There's a whole discussion about that. But yeah, you can see it like that too. Okay, let's continue. So, one more note before we continue. So just to point out, as we said, there's minhagim that spread through the Jewry, and there's minhagim that are located on a very specific area. So things like rice on Pesach, it spread out all over Ashkenaz, and the person is not allowed to change it. Okay, whereas if it's in a specific location, maybe he's allowed to change it, and therefore. There is a dispute in terms of eating kitniot when a woman wants to change that while getting married. If we say it's something that it's spread over all over, then it needs to take away the vow. And if it's not spread, he doesn't need to take the vow. Okay, it's a small minor point I just wanted to mention out. Another thing now.
Can I bring up tefillin?
Yes. Tefillin on Chol HaMoed.
No. We have Sephardis in our synagogue who are now members of our synagogue. They've taken on our traditions, but the one thing they don't change is the way they put on their tefillin and the sign on their hands, which is very different to the Ashkenazi.
So you're bringing up some kind of many issues here, because there's one thing that first of all, we're talking about people that are not observant, meaning it's a whole different category, because they're learning in the process or they're going through, so whatever kind of process they are. And second, they are mixing. So some things they do Sephardi, some things they do Ashkenazi. It's totally wrong. They do a mix of things, and you have to follow one rule. Either you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi. And even if you're Sephardi, then there is rules of how do you act in an Ashkenazi environment. And vice versa, the other side. But to do whatever you want is a problem. Yes, it's a problem. So when you see people that have a Sephardi tefillin and say Ashkenazi, do like this, it's not following anything. It's not following anything.
It's not just Sephardim. The community in Sunderland, I know Johnny Charlton is a member at Pinner, Ashkenazi, but everybody in that community used to put on their tefillin the Sephardi way. I have no idea why and when that started, but that's something that.
So that I would say was the last category. It's called minhag ta'ut, a mistake in the minhag. That there's many, especially if you don't have a concrete source to what you're doing, then it's called the minhag ta'ut. There's some things that I will look it out. Maybe I'll send you some information later. But there's some things in Judaism that we do that has no root for it, and it's a minhag ta'ut.
Well, they may know. I mean, they may know why they did it. I only know it as a friend that remember discussing it with some friends. But I mean, it was a very dati community. Next time I see any of the various people I know from there, I'll ask where it came from.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. So there are minhagim. We talked about minhagim, different types of minhagim with putting borders. But there is minhagim that introduce new practice. And there's number of minhagim mentioned in the Gemara whose purpose is not to protect from a transgressions or decide the halacha, but introduce a new practice. As an example, we said beating the aravot on sukkos. It's a minhag of the prophets. Now, of course, it's a prophet, but it's a minhag of the prophet. Okay. Another point: reciting Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. We just had it now. It's a minhag. Now, interesting. One of the reasons why we recite Hallel is that we do not, because the woman didn't practice certain melachot, certain actions on Rosh Chodesh. So it became a happy day, and we do Hallel. What does that mean? The women took upon themselves on Rosh Chodesh not to do certain things in the house, or not to wash the clothes, or in order to give it honor. And that's why women on Rosh Chodesh is a very, very strong link. And therefore we permit ourselves to say Hallel. Because it's not a Yom Tov, it's not Chanukah, why do we say Hallel? So it was a minhag that they took upon themselves because it's like a happy day they took upon themselves, a minhag. Therefore, is a huge dispute between the Rambam and I think the Rabbeinu Tam, the Tosfot. Do we recite a baracha on a minhag? The Sephardim do not recite a baracha. And therefore, Brian, I have a big issue, because if I'm on the bima, is one thing. I'm a shliach tzibur. I can say a baracha for Hallel, but if I'm on Zoom, do I say a baracha? If you noticed, I let you say the baracha. So it's an issue because it's not a minyan. It's not. I'm the shliach. So it's a gray area, you know.
So you passed it on to me. Thank you.
I passed it on to you. It's your minhag, but I'm giving you my secrets, the nuances. But never mind. The idea is, do we recite the bracha on a minhag or not? And therefore, the Sephardim do not recite the bracha on Hallel of Rosh Chodesh, or any Hallel that is not full Hallel, which is basically the day that we're supposed to do Hallel.
Well, I'm even wondering why we say Amen to the first barachot in the morning without a minyan.
Yeah, Amen. No, Amen is you allowed. There's a whole question. Are you allowed to say Amen on hearing someone on the phone or something like that? There's a discussion. There are rabbis that permit it. It's not called a minyan, but you can equivalent to Amen. So let's say you hear someone saying a bracha, you're allowed to say Amen. There is rabbis. Sorry, Jenny?
Well, I thought that whenever you hear somebody say a bracha, you say Amen. So if I'm lighting the candles and David's saying,
yes, but the whole
next to you, he's in the same area.
Yeah, exactly. The whole question is, am I hearing you?
The presence of a minyan, not. I was querying a different point.
Yeah, and no, baracha. The question is what I'm hearing you now, Jenny. Is it you, or is it a computer that talks to you, or whatever it is?
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Okay. So that's the big dispute with the Rabbi and the Rabbeinu Tam, and again.
Rabbi, I think Brian wanted to say something.
Sorry,
yes.
I've just had somebody appear at the door. I've got to go. Please. Thank you.
Everybody. Bye, Brian.
We'll wrap it up. Okay, we said the Hallel. Just I want to say about prayer. That's the last point I want to bring out. Is when we talk about minhagim and different practices in the prayer, and there's many nusach tefillah. What is this nusach tefillah? We have different types of tefillah. As we said, we go to Yemen, we go to Yekes, we go to Ashkenazi, US. Everyone has a different tefillah. So there's a very nice quote by the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, 1534 to 1572. He's buried in Tzafat, and Chaim Vital, which is students. And he talks about that there are 12 windows in heaven. And every tribe has a different way or different channel to pray to God. And that's why out of the many minhagim, there is basically a wide range of minhagim to pray. And all of these she'arim, all of these gates are gates to go to the same place. So if I'm saying my nusach and you're saying your nusach and you're saying the other nusach, they all come to the same place. But the idea behind it is not because there is a dispute. It's not that because you knew something and I knew something else, or Beishama, Beisilel, whatever it is. It's because there were 12 types of prayer since the beginning, since Moses. Since the time that we got the Torah, there was 12 types of way, and every tribe followed their minhag. Now, who is it? Rabbi Moshe Sofer. So let's come a little bit down to today. Today we have the Hasidim. What is the Hasidim? It's called Minhag Sepharad. It's basically a siddur based on the Arizal, which I just told you about. He's buried in Netzafat, and he took the Sephardi nusach and he added Kabbalistic addings and refinery to that prayer. And then you have the Ashkenazi prayer, and then you have the Yemen else, but mainly those two. So there's Sephardi, there's Ashkenazi, and there's the Hasidic that is basically based. It's called Nusach Ha'ari, that it's a Sephardi but refined. They explain that this is the best way because the Hasidim, going back to the history of Hasidim, but they were there to go to all the people in all these villages that didn't have a tutor, and basically to the wander Jew, and they call it, and the Rabbi Chaim Vital said it was not 12 gates, but there was 13. What is the 13th gate? It's the gate that someone that doesn't have a tribe, and that is the Arizal combination, which those that don't have another tribe. And the Hasidim basically is saying that today we're all like without tribes, and we're all left out there, and we need to daven that style. Another explanation to follow the Ashkenazic is that it is following the Yerushalmi. The person shouldn't switch his nusach, but who says that? Rabbi Yisrael of Sokolov. He says that the nusach of the Ashkenazi is preferable. Why? Because some claim it's direct tradition from the Anshe Knesset Agadola, from the assembly, and that's why you should stick to the Ashkenazi. Whereas Rabbi Badia says that no. He says that the Sephardi, of course, is the real tradition. That's what he says, and he says that the nusach Ha'ari, that this Hasidim did the refinery, wasn't as the Hasidim said. The Sephardi version that we have today is the refinery of the Nusach Ha'ari. So basically, he says that the Sephardi Siddur today is what the Hari said, and that's the correct way to do. Of course, everyone should follow their own minhagim. But I think what was very interesting to understand in regarding to prayer is that there's many challenges. It's many paths to have a correct prayer, and therefore. And the reason behind it, you have to understand, is that prayer is mainly about what you have, that feeling, your heart, and the character that we have inside of us that defines how we pray to Hashem. And therefore, everyone has a different way. Of course, there's common things. So every tribe has a different channel to get to Hashem. And it continues to what we explained about the breastplate of the Kohanim, that everyone have a different color, everyone have a different stone, a different variation of a connection to Hashem. But nevertheless, of course, the core of the prayer is the same. So with that, we finished this part. Any questions?
Time, please. Can I?
Yes.
Go first, Marsha.
Okay, thank you. So many years ago, we were in Tel Aviv for a holiday, and my father had yahrzeit for his father. So he went to shul, the nearest shul that he could walk to, for Ma'ariv. And when it came to saying Kaddish, he just stood up like he would normally do and started to say Kaddish. But the minhag in this shul was that one person said it for everybody and came forward. And so everybody went, shh, 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 sat my father down and stopped him. He went, and he was quite embarrassed and quite upset. He actually went back to the same shul the next morning for Shacharit, and when it came to the Kaddish, which was the same format, they invited my father to come forward and say it for everybody else. But when you're saying that if something is a temporary situation and you've got what you're used to and what they do, what is the right thing in this? I mean, it wasn't right to embarrass him. And it's obviously something you can't know in advance. You go to somewhere where, by the very nature of it, a minhag can be very, very specific.
You have to follow the rules. If you come to a synagogue, it's like a territory. If you come to a synagogue, you have to follow the rules of the synagogue. They shouldn't have embarrassed him, that's for sure. But never mind. But regarding the halacha, you have to follow. If any synagogue that I come in, I have to follow the rules of, again, only if it's against the halacha, it's something else. But if it's a minhag, the place, you have to always follow the ruling of the place. Yeah. Yeah. Again, regarding Kaddish, saying it together, not together, there's a whole discussion about it. Especially that we need to hear everyone say it in the same tone, not in the different tones. And you can, without shul, you can see some examples.
Yeah. It's just what they did, but it's still, I'm going back a very long time, and he still talks about it. He's still.
Yeah, you see, that's called embarrassing someone in public. This is one of the biggest sins. We say doesn't have olam haba is the huge sin, a huge sin. I just said it in the Pirkei Avot.
Yeah.
It puts away all the minhagim aside. That's we have to, again, this is a minhags, need to put the right level to it. But again, just to finish, there is minhags like is a solid, which is a minhagim of that comes from the Gemara, comes from later on, and there's minhag that is wrong minhag, and minhags that are prohibitions, a specific location like not driving before Shabbat or not. We have to you have to see when you're allowed to imply it or not, and how to change it. Yes, Chaim.
Said earlier, you mentioned Al titosh Torat imecha.
Yes.
You shouldn't leave your mother's law or custom. And before that, there's something which confuses Shema b'ni Musar avicha. The difference between Musar and Torah. So, how does that relate to the minhag?
As I said, there's many answers to it. I'll send you some answers. Remind me. I'll send these many quotes on it. But just to say to you, Torah, the father educates the person for the right character to behave, to become a good Jew, and Torah Timecha is the traditions that go through the mother, because she's the one that continues the memory of the family to generation after generation. One second.